I wish that I could go to the track every single time you go to the track and coach you, but I can't do that. In fact, I love coaching so much that I wish I could coach every single driver when they go to the track. Obviously, that's not practical. So what I'm going to do here in this video is talk to you about how to coach yourself, self-coaching, sort of the act of bringing out the best in yourself. And there's a process that I use whenever I'm coaching a driver, and the process goes like this. The very first thing I do is I identify what the driver needs to work on. So in your case, you're going to sit back and kind of really think about, what is it that I want to improve? Oh, and by the way, it's important to also think about what you're already doing well, because sometimes if you just do more of what you're already doing well, you don't have to worry about what you're not doing well. So take a little time to think about that and really identify what it is that you want to work on the next time you go on track. So that's step one. Step two, and I would say this is the area that most drivers don't do enough of. And the idea here is to clarify. So the second part is clarifying what it is that you've identified. You know, a lot of drivers will go, oh, for the first session or next session, I want to brake later. Well, just braking later it's not clear enough. Your brain can't process that at speed on the track. So what you need to do is you need to clarify that and think about it in terms of, well, am I going to brake 1 car length later? 500 feet later? How much later are you going to brake? And at the same time, are you going to brake harder, or are you going to move the whole brake zone in? And then what is that going to do to your turn-in speed? Are you going to have a higher turn-in speed now? In which case, you got to think about that. How is that going to change the way you come off the brake pedal? So getting clear on not just, I'm going to brake later, but how are you going to brake later? Where are you going to brake later? What is that going to do to the rest of the line through the corner? So really take some time to clarify that. Then the next part of clarifying actually is putting some kind of a trigger or a reminder for you when you get back on track. And in the case of I'm going to brake later, and you identified that what you're going to do is you're also going to brake harder, then in that case you might kind of go, every single time you think about it, you go, I'm going to brake, that initial application of the brake is going to be harder. So hard initial, hard initial, hard initial. And you say that over and over a number of times, so that then when you get on track, you're very, very clear what you're going to do. I also recommend that you take a few minutes to really kind of process this or visualize it in your mind before you go on track. So now we've identified, we've clarified. Now the fun part, we get to go on track and actually do it. But when you're on track now rather than coming up down the front straightaway and you're thinking, oh, I just want to get a good lap time. No, you're thinking hard initial. So when you get to that first brake zone, it's hard initial on the brakes, and you really focus on just that. Because when you focus on that act of driving, the thing that you really, really want to do, then you're more likely to do what you want to do and get the lap time that you're after. So it's the third part of this is to drive focused, not just drive, but drive focused in a very focused way on exactly what you've identified and clarified. Of course, you come off the track and you debrief and kind of go through that whole process again. That debrief process, we'll talk about that in a minute, but that part of it starts the whole cycle again. So you repeat the whole thing all over again. So that's the process we go through. What are the tools we're going to use? Let's talk about that. The tools for self-coaching. And the first tool is so simple, we carry it around with us all the time. They're questions. We just simply ask ourselves questions, the right kind of questions. We talk about not just, what could I do better? Oh, I could brake later. Well, again, how much later? How much harder am I going to push on the pedal? Am I going to move the brake zone in? So ask yourself some questions of, what if I turned in with more speed? What would happen? What if I got back to power sooner? Where should I be looking? Can I carry more speed to this corner? Just start asking yourself those questions. And every single time you answer one of those questions, ask it again. Dig deeper. I talk about, or think about it as, we're peeling back the layers of the onion, and we're trying to get to the core of the onion. That's what we're really after, because when we got that, we're really, really clear and we're focused on what we want to do. So asking questions seems pretty simple, but it's really important. And sometimes if you're sitting there and you're going, well, I don't know. That's when you ask yourself, well, if I did know, what would it be? So really, really dig deep when you're asking yourself those questions. The second part is a good old track map. I love using a track map on a digital one, so I can make some notes on it and save my notes afterwards, but you can use a paper version as well. So having a track map, it's super important. And to me, when you're asking yourself these questions, it's important that you've got something that you can look at to help kind of frame everything. Your brain will process those questions and come up with better answers if you have a track map. I know it sounds simple, but having a track map in front of you to think about as you're going through that, that's really important. The third tool we're going to use is simply lap times and segment times. Lap times are, they're a great metric. They're that's the result, the end result, right? But sometimes we can actually get part of the track better, but the other part of the track is not as good. And we don't know if we've made some progress. We might have made some progress in that braking zone, but maybe even the track conditions have changed, so we're not seeing that in the overall lap time. And that's why sometimes it's important to dig in and look at the segment times if you've got that opportunity. And that's where we kind of get to the more technology. We can use data and video. And obviously data and video is it's easy these days to use, and I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the Garmin Catalyst here, because that's my favorite self-coaching tool. It's a tool that helps you get to identify, because the Catalyst itself helps identify the 3 most important opportunities you have to improve. That's so important. Sometimes we get out of the car and we go, well, I could fix this, I could fix this, I could fix this, and you end up with a list of 8 things that you could work on. But what is the most important thing? Well, the Catalyst helps you prioritize those things and gives you 3 opportunities. So that's really important. It also then helps you get clear on that mental picture, that visualization, helps you clarify that, because it actually puts together your optimal lap in a video, and it stitches together all those segments we talked about, and it stitches them together into one video that you can sit there and watch over and over and over again and go, that's the optimal lap. And it's an optimal lap that you've actually done, because it's pulling from your best segments. So it stitches that together. You can watch that over and over and over again. Hopefully close your eyes, imagine a few of those laps as well, and then go on track and drive. So you've got a good mental model of what it is you're trying to do. And then the other great thing about the Catalyst is it gives you immediate feedback when you're in the car. It is like having me in the car next to you, talking to you, because it's giving you those audio cues of harder braking coming into this corner, turn in earlier here, and new best, you just got a new best segment. So it actually has real-time audio cues or coaching while you're driving on track. So great self-coaching tool. Okay, to recap the tools, number 1 is ask questions. Pretty simple, but super powerful, because it makes you aware and it helps you remind yourself of what it is you need to do. 2 is the track map. And what I want to emphasize here is the importance of writing things down on that track map. The saying is, people live up to what they write down. So write down what it is you want to do, and then the likelihood of you doing that when you get on the track has just gone way up. 3rd is looking at the lap times, and more importantly, segment times. So you're honing in on certain parts of the track and what you're working on. And finally, using the technology of data and video and the tools that we can use there. The last thing I want to touch on with self-coaching is practice in a very deliberate, strategic way of doing it. A lot of drivers will go on track and just try to practice the whole lap, and it doesn't work as well that way. I always think that, if football teams practiced the way drivers practice, they would just show up for practice and they play a game. But they don't do that, do they? What they do is they break the game down into individual specific drills and practice those. They do blocking drills, they do passing drills, they do running drills. They break the game down into these little chunks, practice them over and over again, fine-tune them, and get to the point where they're at their very best in those things, and then kind of piece some of those together and do a scrimmage, and then eventually put it all together and play a game. You should take the same approach. So when you go on track, break the act of driving down into little chunks. Just work on your braking, just work on your turning, just work on your smooth, just work on the getting back to throttle, just work on your vision, all of these things. And the more you break it down into little chunks, the more effective it's going to be. So again, I would love to come and coach you. I'd love to be there every single time you go on track. Again, I can't do that, but I can give you this method, this process, and some tools to help you do that on your own. So keep learning, keep having fun.